Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland, Harlan Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland, Harlan Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by Mary-Anne Constable. Mary-Anne is the founder of MummaPod, offering services to women seeking to become more informed and confident in their pregnancy, birth, and journey towards motherhood. What's unique about Mary-Anne is how she brings together a variety of professionals under the MummaPod banner, enabling a culture of collaboration between the professionals that are there to help women in this new chapter of their lives. And be sure to listen to the end, where Mary-Anne shares with us how she and her team are striving to improve pregnancy, birth, and motherhood for the better, aiming to give everyone a positive experience. So whether you're interested in knowing more about hypnobirthing or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. Welcome, Mary-Anne, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. Mary-Anne, I'm really excited about this conversation because, well, being the father of two young children myself, I got to witness the transformation that pregnancy had on my wife's life. And I think our listeners can learn a lot from your expertise in this area. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So Mary-Anne, where did you grow up?
I grew up, I'm a Londoner, born and bred. So I was born at a hospital in Roehampton, and that's now closed down. And then I grew up in Putney and then shortly moved to central London and then have now ended up in Teddington. I was about to say Kingston, I'm in Teddington, which, is great.
Very cool. And what did you go to study after secondary school?
Oh, God. I studied at Edinburgh. I studied theology and religious studies, which didn't come to much use, but it was a fun time back in the day.
To me, theology as a degree sounds fascinating. It really does. I'm just a bit of a geek, I think, but yeah. And could you tell us a little bit about your career before you set up your business?
Yeah, so I think someone was recently telling me they worked out my cosmic number. I can't remember what they said. Maybe it was 5, and I'm a traveller. And I was like, well, I barely move around. She's like, oh, that can mean anything. It can mean that you change job all the time. And I was like, so after university, I started 3 months in recruitment. That wasn't for me. And then I did about 2.5 years as an insurance broker, working private equity and mergers acquisitions. Can't remember, those that long ago. Then did some private banking and then finished up in events where I was for a couple of years, full on, massive pay cut, but really good for building up my confidence with kind of people. That was much more people type job. And then I got pregnant. And we'll let the story flow from there later.
Absolutely. So bringing this conversation to the present, could you tell us a little bit about your business today?
Yeah. So MummaPod was born out of hypnobirthing. And that is something that I kind of discovered when I was still at that events job and pregnant. So probably about 30 weeks pregnant. And I went to do a hypnobirthing course in Islington, where I used to live. And I really enjoyed the course. I then went on to have a really positive first birth in a hospital, where I felt really empowered. Don't get me wrong, it was a tough gig. I don't think first time mama's birth is easy for anyone. But I felt really empowered, and then kind of went on when it was time to return to work. I decided instead of that, I would look into trying to share that experience with other people. So trained as a hypnobirthing teacher, not just after, when Max was my first son was about 10 months old, I did that training. And then just got lucky, walked into a yoga studio, said, hi, I'm a hypnobirthing teacher. And they said, we'll take you in-house. And it was a really reputable yoga studio in Islington. So went straight to teaching group courses every week, which was brilliant. And mid kind of that stage, moved over to Teddington, didn't let go of that gig quite as early as I should have done. So I was commuting an hour and a half to get to Islington every Monday night to go and teach and then come back because I loved doing it. And then I think when I was maybe 38 weeks pregnant with my second child, I was like, time to let go of Islington and move here. And then I did take maternity leave with Molly, but I went straight back to teaching within about 2-3 months. Because I just can't let it go. I love teaching it. And then from that, it then grew into something bigger. So when Molly was about 6 months old and covered in chickenpox, I went and did a doula course with something called Delivering Doulas, and then started attending births because there'd been this demand when I was teaching hypnobirthing for people wanting me to go to their birth to actually kind of do the hypnobirthing practices and support them at that kind of time. So went to train to do that. And then that's been about a year and a bit now, I've been doing that, and it's kind of taken that natural next step. But when I brought that onto MummaPod, I then felt like it was really worthwhile bringing all my other contacts on as well. So whether it be like yoga, sleep consultancy, or motherhood coaching, whether you're kind of wanting some help in motherhood or returning to work, some coaching that was available out there. And photography and all sorts of different offerings kind of all in one place in this area. So Kingston, Surbiton, Teddington and the surrounding areas, Surrey, that bit of London.
Yeah, and that's what I really like about your business, Mary-Anne. I find it fascinating that I think from an outsider, what it looks like you've done is you've arranged this collaboration of professionals under the MummaPod brand. I just really like the feeling around that. So I think that's fascinating. And there's a couple of things you've mentioned there, which I sort of want to pull those threads a little bit further. Firstly, for our listeners who perhaps, like me, aren't aware of hypnobirthing or what hypnobirthing is, could you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yes, I definitely can. So I think the phrase hypnobirthing is horrific. It puts off probably a huge audience because they think it's something maybe a bit too hippie, a bit too alternative. And for the listeners, they can't see me, but I'm pretty standard down the line, normal person, normal with a broad definition there. I'm wearing a t-shirt that says weirdo, so that puts a bit of a pinch of salt in it. Show the t-shirt.
Very cool.
So, hypnobirthing would be better off if it was called a full birth preparation. It's giving you really insightful knowledge about what happens to your body, how the birth system works, whether it be NHS or private or home birth, how independent midwives work. So all that information, what your body's doing when it goes through labour and pregnancy and then birth and postnatally, ways of relaxation, how your brain works, how to ease relaxation, what happens if, you're not relaxing in birth, what your body can then result in happening to you. Ways to be calm, in control, knowledgeable, so that when you come to, going into labour, you feel really prepared for what's about to come and you get the best possible outcome. It's how you drive the system. It's how your birth partner can support you. So, for instance, a big part of the preparation would be do all this homework, get your mindset completely different when you face birth. Don't fear it, be really open to it. And then when labour happens, just sit back and relax. And let the partner be the driver. I always kind of explain it as like he's the Uber driver and she's just in the backseat chilling out, while he can be like the voice and the person kind of playing a huge partner. And that's why it is very much for partners. But that's a kind of summary. It's very hard to describe it in a few words, but that is hypnobirthing. It's birth preparation, antenatal course.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. There's some relevancy there as to what you said with my profession as well, because money is such a taboo subject, and it's a subject that people they gather a whole lot of noise around it throughout their life, from family, from friends, from the bloke down the pub, from the internet. And my job is to untangle a lot of that noise and to just make sure people understand what that means in their life. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm hearing from you and I can remember my wife and I consumed so much noise that was irrelevant to when the moment actually came. So I can see how relevant some guidance like that is for parents to be, for sure. Could you give us an example of how your work has helped your clients?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a whole dedicated webpage on my website to positive birth stories. And, you know, the kind of thing that comes out of it all is that every birth is completely different. I can't tell you how your birth's going to be. But what, you know, hypnobirthing, trusting that you have absorbed it all, it's giving you that access to a positive birth experience. So times that it has helped is I get these messages. I had one probably about 10 minutes ago being like, it was a really positive experience. I'm really happy with the outcome. And so often, you know, people fear it. They fear birth. They think, oh God, something horrific's going to happen to me. I'm going to hospital. It's something medical. And actually that's so far from the truth. It doesn't need to be medicalized. Yes, I'd say you want a midwife there, okay, because they're the expert in a normal birth. And if something does go awry, great that they can be there. But it's giving that mother knowledge, and a positive birth experience. So
that's
there's
fascinating.
a whole load of examples you can read about.
Absolutely. And in preparation for this conversation, Mary-Anne, I also noted that you're involved in co-running I think it's called the Positive Birth Movement in the Kingston area. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I was going to move on to that. So hypnobirthing isn't cheap. I try to do lots of different packages so that it is accessible to more people, from group courses on Zoom to private in-person courses. But the Positive Birth Movement is something that I co-run with another doula called Lara, and hypnobirthing teacher who is in Kingston. And we've left it free. We ask for donations to help its running because it's changed in price, but there's no obligation to make donation. And it's a monthly group at the moment on Zoom. And you log in and you listen to someone's recent positive birth story, and you ask them all sorts of different questions about all the details. I mean, all the nitty and gritty of it all. And then you also, after that, listen to that positive birth experience of something recent and current, and usually the trusts, the hospitals that you'll be having a baby. You then have access to Lara and myself to ask any kind of further questions, not medical questions, because they're for medically trained people, but just insight about birth and how to drive your birth, basically. But it's a free group, so open to anyone to attend it. And honestly, every time it comes around, I'm like, oh God, we've got the Positive Birth Movement. I come off call and I ring Lara and I'm like, I love running that group. It's so great. It's so positive. And people love telling positive stories. We're of a culture where we thrive on negativity. Just think about COVID. We're like, oh God, COVID. And actually, it's really nice to just get off call and be like, that was just all so positive and lovely.
Yeah.
We run that as well. Great.
Big time. So if I may switch gears on you slightly, Mary-Anne, because you've now mentioned COVID a few times. How has COVID impacted your business? And what are some of the things that you did in your business to, I guess, keep it going, but also continue this contact with your clients as well?
Yeah, so the joy of COVID and lockdown in summer, I expected it to go really quiet because the second birth partners were no longer allowed in hospitals. So I thought as a doula capacity, I'd be very quiet, but actually I wasn't. The rate of home births dramatically increased. So I was supporting as a birth partner in homes or getting mothers to the hospital, walking them to the hospital door and then leaving them there. But each of those births were really positive. And then in terms of my hypnobirthing offering, it all moved online. And it got cheaper because I now had this online offering, and I'd never thought about teaching online. And I'd always say in person is more beneficial. You can bounce off each other more. There's, more body language to share. If I did a relaxation, I'd probably do it in person, not necessarily over Zoom unless it was specifically requested. But it meant that I could still kind of reach a wider audience by doing it on Zoom. So ended up, because of COVID, I was teaching people in Kenya, which, that wasn't an opportunity that I had before COVID. So there were the benefits of it, but my God, I'm going to get square eyes from sitting on the computer all day, right?
You're not alone. You're not alone. Absolutely. Mary-Anne, in your capacity as a doula, you've obviously been witness to many, many, many really intimate moments, if not the most intimate moment between a woman and her baby who's been born and her partner who is there. What are some of your, just given that mileage, that experience that you have in this area, what are some of your beliefs around birthing and around pregnancy that you then filter into your business as well?
Do you know, it's a really good question, because actually the whole becoming a doula changed my hypnobirthing offering. It made me realize that every birth is really completely different. I had 2 births that were back to back. So one was on a Sunday and one was on a Monday. And their due dates were a month apart. So there's just an example of how different it can be. And one came in the space of an hour and the other took 3 days. But in both of those cases, so different, but those mothers were completely entitled to a positive experience where they felt in control and they felt really empowered. And it's not just about the mother about the baby mattering. It's so much about the mum and the baby mattering. They say that so many people say, oh, it's fine because the baby's healthy. And it's like, yes, that is really important, but it's not the only thing that matters. The mum is being born at that time that, she gives birth as well. And, this in control thing is so key in this day and age. We go to the doctor and we might be poorly and they give us some drugs and we just take them and that's it. We just think, oh yeah, they have ownership of our bodies. And I want you now, having listened to this podcast, to go to the doctor, they give you drugs, and question it. Be like, what else is there? What are the alternative options? And you get to own that experience a bit more. And it's so relevant in birth. It's your birth. It's not the midwife's birth. It's not the obstetrician's birth. It is your birth. And you get to have some choice in that room.
I think that's super important. And I appreciate you sharing that. Mary-Anne, what are some of the key business lessons that you've learned throughout your life?
So I would say don't be scared of changing career. Ever, because we luckily are in a day and age where you don't have to stick out a really long career if you don't like it. Obviously things are hard at the current time, but they will change. And I would say communication above anything else is the most important thing when it comes to business. It's all about chat. It's not about, output on paper. It's about that communication that's absolutely key.
Yeah, I second that. When you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
Oh, all the babies and all the stories. And, the lovely thing is, as much as I feel like Instagram is a great source, and we met through Instagram, which is great, but it's a bit addictive and all that. But I put something up and all these mums and dads that I've supported are the ones that reply. And it's because you've become this key part of their journey to holding that baby. And it's so often, I think, and I felt this way when I had my second baby, I felt like I had to thank the midwife. I felt like she'd given me that positive birth experience. But it's you, it's yourself. And sometimes I think that people have that same comparison. They're like, oh, it's because I did the hypnobirthing course. I really have to thank Mary-Anne. And it's like, no, it was all you. But that is the key thing that I get out of it, is all the amazing little babies that are out there. Hypno babies.
That's very cool. Very cool. And what next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
So next to come, I'm looking for more people to join MummaPod. I'm looking for reflexology. I'm looking for, alternative therapies, like acupuncture, people in the area that would be interested to join MummaPod. Come my way. That would be my next sort of thing. But in terms of my own offerings, I'm probably at capacity. Hypnobirthing, doulaing, studying, and 2 children and a puppy. I think it's quite a lot.
That's fantastic. Indeed, it is a lot. And hats off to you for juggling all of that. But it sounds like exciting times ahead. So for the listeners of the Inside Kingston podcast, you heard it here first. Let's put the shout out to your contacts in the area and ask them to contact Mary-Anne if it's of relevance. So thanks for that, Mary-Anne. As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So, Mary-Anne, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
That's not an easy one to answer. If it was my husband, he'd be like, please tell her how. But do you know what? Another thing that lockdown gave me is running. So it's like if you found me a year ago, I'd be like, I don't run. And then being in lockdown with the 2 screaming children, because Max is 4 and Molly is almost 2. So that was kind of like 2 separate entities, where I had to kind of put myself in half and entertain them both at the same time. And then my husband was working full time. So I found running and now I run. So that I found really relaxing. I got my personal best this morning, actually. I mean, it's still not fast, but that is some of the best head clearing stuff ever. So I went out at 6:30 this morning and I ran round the Thames. I ran down to Kingston, then up. and all the fog was lifting from the water. And I was like, this is just so relaxing. You don't have to go fast, but I really love that. I'm a big sucker for a long bath with essential oils. That is my big key relaxing thing. And then, eating.
Very cool.
Not at the same time.
Yeah. And our children are of pretty much exactly the same age and difference there. So you know what I'm talking about? I absolutely second running like you wouldn't believe.
Between them both. Oh,
that's it. Are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Yes, I am halfway through at the moment. I Am Not Your Baby Mother by Candice Braithwaite, which talks all about race and maternity system and how she was a Black mother that was not treated fairly at all within the NHS. And it really is the starting point of, Black people are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth. So that is an incredible read, really easy pick up and quick to read. And it's talking about some massively key issues. And the other book that I've been reading, obviously they're all birth related because that's my passion, is Overdue by Amity Reid. And that's talking about birth, burnout, and the blueprint for a better NHS. Because what you might not know is, as much as hypnobirthing is talking about how you drive that NHS system and how you work best with a midwife, it doesn't talk about the fact that 29 out of 30 newly qualified midwives leave the profession. Wow. It's a hardcore profession. They do a really, really intense, hard degree. And then the NHS it's not an easy place to work. It's the second biggest organisation in the world. Put that in context for those that have worked in corporations and you try and change something or go above and beyond the standard protocol. To do that in the NHS is tough. It's a hard place to work. So her book, which I've just started picking up, is going to talk about some amazing key issues.
That's really interesting. Are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Always. So I'm going to recommend 2. Last night I finished The Fall. Oh God, it's dark. And it's quite strange being attracted to a murderer because my God, he's good looking. So ladies and some fellas, you might enjoy watching that. And the other one, which is amazing for the breastfeeding days, mums that are listening, is Working Mums. I don't know if you've seen either of those.
Yeah, my wife watches Working Mums, and I'm when I'm working in the evenings, I sort of pick it up, and the dialogue is superb. It's superb.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
So they can look at my website, www.mummapod, mummapod.com. And there's a list of all our services and different packages for hypnobirthing. And you can contact me there on my email address. And I think it's got my telephone number if you ever want to ring me. But yeah.
Well, for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I add these resources to the show notes. Mary-Anne, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Thanks very much for having me.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.